want to begin by a very brief review of where we got to last week. We're discussing what is wisdom as a mode of biblical thought. And I explained last week that wisdom is a parallel way of knowing how to conduct ourselves in the world using our own minds. The parallel is to revelation. Most of the Bible is concerned with revelation, God revealing himself to humans and instructing us on how to conduct ourselves. Wisdom is a parallel system using the godly gifts of our own intelligence to navigate our way in the world. I say parallel, not alternative, because wisdom works in parallel to revelation. God gives us both. God reveals himself through his prophets, through his Nevi'im, through his Torah, which is delivered through the Nevi'im, and wisdom works in parallel to revelation. Wisdom also recognizes that revelation does not provide all of the answers. We know this instinctually as we navigate our ways through our lives. We know instinctually that God does not give us a guidebook how to conduct every aspect of our lives. But it is a question as to why. Why doesn't God just reveal everything to us? Why does he leave so much to ourselves? That's an answer to which we do not have, but it is a theme that we can explore, and we will touch upon that today. Where is wisdom found? Where do we get wisdom from? So let me start, first of all, with a very prosaic answer, which is in the Hebrew Bible, in the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible, there are a few books that scholars have identified as wisdom books. There are several books, the book of Proverbs, the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, some Tehillim, some Mizmorim, some chapters of the book of Psalms are considered to be wisdom psalms, that wisdom is found in those particular chapters. And the book of Eov, the book of Job, is also considered by biblical scholars to be a wisdom book. And we're going to be focused on Job today, on Eov. The title of the lecture is To Rain Down on Uninhabited Land, and we'll see the significance of that particular verse, that particular pasuk, towards the very end of today's lecture. And the subtitle of the lecture is Job and the Wisdom of the East. Let's turn now to the source sheet so that I can explain to you why I entitled it The Wisdom of the East. Whoops. Sorry. Yeah, there we go.
Can you make that a little bigger,
Again, just a wave if you can all see the source sheet on the screen. Yes. Okay.
Make it a little bigger, please.
We have this verse from the book of Malachim, from the book of Kings. Chokmat Shlomo michokmat kol bnei Kedem. Solomon's wisdom, King Solomon, who is known as the wisest of the wise. When the book of Kings wants to tell us how wise King Solomon was, and by the way, I'm not going to talk about King Solomon today because he'll be the subject specifically of next week's lecture, and as well of the following lecture, so I'm not going to dwell on Solomon. But Solomon was known as the wisest of the wise, and when the Bible wants to tell us just how wise Solomon was, he says that Solomon was wiser mikol b'nei Kedem, of all of the people of the East. The people of the East are considered to be the benchmark for wisdom. Wisdom was known as something that was held by the people of the East, and that is why I've entitled it "The Wisdom of the East." It was a particular mode of Eastern thinking, and as I said, the people of the East are associated with wisdom. You also see in this pasuk, "Umikol chochmat Mitzrayim," and then all of the wisdom of the Egyptians. Not only was the ancient Near East considered to be the hub of wisdom, but so was Egypt. And for those of you who remember last week's lecture, it's not by coincidence that Joseph, who exemplifies wisdom in the Torah, he is the exemplar of wisdom in the Torah, of course, is located in Egypt. Egypt was considered in the ancient world to be a hub of wisdom. We have from the ancient world many, many Egyptian wisdom texts. A lot of them have very similar ideas to the wisdom texts that we find in the Tanakh, and we'll talk a little bit today about why it would be the case that Egyptian wisdom looks so much like biblical wisdom. But we see here that wisdom is something that is associated with the East. It is associated with Egypt. I also want to point out that by calling it the wisdom of the East, it also separates it from Western philosophy. Wisdom is the closest thing we have in the Tanakh to what is known as Western philosophy, which is usually traced back to Socrates. We have the pre-Socratics as well. However, Western philosophy is very different than wisdom in that wisdom presumes, as I said, revelation and God. Western philosophy is seen as something that is actually in counter-distinction to religion. You need somebody that's like a Rambam for Jews or an Aquinas for Christians to reconcile Western philosophy with religion because they seem to be in opposition to each other. Are you a philosopher or are you a religious person? And it takes like a Rambam and Maimonides to say that, the two of them can be reconciled. Not so with wisdom. Wisdom is in something that works completely with religion and with God. There is no contradiction between the two, as we last week. Wisdom comes from God, as we see in the next source here. And this was what we looked at last week. We noticed that God gave wisdom through the fruit of the tree of knowledge. When humans imbibed the fruit of the tree of knowledge, we were given wisdom, and we were given this parallel ability to arrive at ideas of how to conduct ourselves in the world. And we also saw from this quote last week the two sources of instruction of Torah, one from revelation, God actually talking to humans, and the other from the mind, from wisdom. What we didn't focus on last time when we looked at this second source here from Genesis 2, what we didn't focus on is the fact that wisdom existed at the beginning of the world. Wisdom existed before the Torah. The Torah we don't get for an enormous amount of time afterwards at Har Sinai, but from the beginning of the Bible, wisdom already exists. In fact, it exists before the Jewish people exists. Wisdom has something that is universal to it. It exists pre-Israelite, pre-Jewish people. It is there from the beginning of the world, and in fact, we find out from the book of Proverbs, which I mentioned to you, is a wisdom book in the Tanakh. Here we have Proverbs 3:19. Hashem b'chokhmah yasad aretz. The Lord founded the earth by wisdom. When God created the world, he created the world using wisdom, which means that wisdom pre-exists before the world itself, before creation. Wisdom is something that is eternal. It is here before we are here. It is here before world is here. That's a theme we're going to explore a little bit today as well. We also looked last week at Genesis 39 and specifically at the connection between wisdom and morality. I showed you this selection from Genesis 39, and I showed you how when Joseph refuses the entreaties of Potiphar's wife, right? He invokes ethics. He invokes morality and says, I could not do such a thing. It would be a terrible thing to do with my master. And I indicated last time that wisdom presumes a certain type of natural morality. It's not that Joseph had access to the Torah and could see that adultery was forbidden. It's that he felt that this was a thing that was unnatural, unethical, immoral, something that one should not do. A thinking human being knows that to deceive one's master who's uh, been so good to him would be something that is unethical. So wisdom is intimately connected with ethics, and that's true of the entire wisdom school in the Tanakh. And we also saw, and again, I didn't point this out last time, but I did show you that we, the readers of the Torah, are told that God was with Joseph while he was in Egypt. Remember, Joseph doesn't know this. There's no revelation to Joseph. That was my point last time. But we, the readers, know that God was with Joseph, and that God did good things to Joseph. Hashem was with Joseph, extending kindness to him and disposing the chief jailer favorably towards him. That's what I focused on last time. What I want to point out this time, just now that we're revisiting this text, is that wisdom has rewards. Uh, Joseph, acting in a wise way, is actually rewarded by God for doing so. And that's a big, big topic in the wisdom literature. Does wisdom produce rewards here on earth? And there is a variety of opinion among wisdom thinkers as to whether this is the case. And if it's the case, if this is the case, much of the time, all of the time, any of the time. Here we see, we're told as the readers of the Torah very clearly, Joseph did the right thing, and Hashem rewarded him. That Hashem was with him. That's a theme, and specifically a theme we're going to look at today. Let's turn then to the book of Psalms. I told you that there are specific Tehillim, specific Mizmorim, specific chapters of the book of Psalms, which are called wisdom chapters. They're called wisdom Psalms. And we're going to focus on Psalm 112 for a few minutes. But the very last verse of the preceding psalm is a beautiful introduction. And in fact, it's the way we introduce our daily lives. Those of us who davened this morning said this. It's in the Ashkenazi Siddur, in the morning service, in the preliminary service. Right here from this wisdom song, Reshit Chochma Yirat Hashem. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. All who practice it gain sound understanding. Praise of him is everlasting. You've seen this beautiful quote that we say every morning, right? Once again, something I pointed out to you just a little while ago, that wisdom goes hand in hand with religion, right? The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. To really be somebody who is a wisdom thinker, the first thing is you have to be a religious person. You have to fear God. All wisdom begins with God. Very different, as I said, from philosophy. And again, you see here the idea that it has its rewards. All who practice it gain sound understanding. Sechel tov, the cholos. So good thing to be wise. And this theme is expanded on in Psalm 112. Psalm 112 is going to elaborate on all of the amazing gifts that we get through wisdom. Let's take a look at this wisdom psalm. Hallelujah, Ashrei ish yarei et Hashem b'mitzvotav chafetz meod. Hallelujah, happy is the man who fears the Lord, who is ardently devoted to his commandments. His descendants will be mighty in the land. So if you fear God, which you see here, is tied to wisdom, right? Again, the beginning of wisdom is fearing the Lord. Uh, you're going to be strong, right? And you're going to end up being a strong person. A blessed generation of upright men. So again, there's the connection between wisdom, reward, and the idea of ethics, being upright. Wealth and riches are in his house, and his beneficence lasts forever. Turns out, according to this psalm, wisdom, which begins with the fear of the Lord, brings you lots of money. If you are wise, wisdom will produce wealth as well as a reward. Sounds like wisdom's a pretty great thing. Practically as well, you get a lot of reward, very tangible reward from wisdom. A light shines for the upright in the darkness. And so once again, we're talking about people who are yashar, people who are ethical, and the psalm expands what that means. So what is this wise person? This person is not just ethical, they're gracious and compassionate and beneficent. So we see that there are characteristic traits, there are personality traits of the wise. Wise people are generous people, they're gracious people, they're compassionate. I want to point out, even though here it's tied to mitzvot, it's tied to commandments, one of the things that stretches throughout the wisdom literature, it's not tied specifically to mitzvot that we think of as Jewish mitzvot. It's not tied to Shabbos and Yontif, um, and to kashrut, all sorts of things that we specifically think of as Jewish mitzvot. These are very universal principles of ethical behavior. The wisdom school is very unique in the Tanakh in that it never talks about the story of Israel. It is really talking about universal principles, which of course are found within the Torah, but these are principles that all wise people anywhere should be able to obey. And also, you see, it goes beyond the specifics of the Torah. It's not just the actual acts that you're supposed to perform in terms of giving tzedakah. It doesn't talk about exactly how much tzedakah you're supposed to give and exactly bikur cholim, whatever. It's a characteristic trait that wise people are generally gracious and compassionate and beneficent. You know the right thing to do and you do it. All goes well with the man who lends generously, right? You should. People come to you to ask you for money. You should lend out generously. There's no mitzvah that you have to be like overly generous, but this is something that good wise people do. You conduct your affairs with equity. He shall never be shaken. The beneficent man will be remembered forever. He is not afraid of evil tidings. His heart is firm. He trusts in the Lord. Again, there's that connection to trusting in Hashem. His heart is resolute. He is unafraid. In the end, he will see the fall of his foes. The wise man, I saw one of the people who was listening head nodded in this knowing way. Yes, sounds pretty good, doesn't it? That if you're wise and you're ethical and you do the right thing and you fear God, all of your enemies will fall before you. You'll always be victorious. He gives freely to the poor. His beneficence lasts forever. His horn is exalted in his honor. The wicked man shall see it and be vexed. He shall gnash his teeth. His courage shall fail. The desire of the wicked shall come to nothing. Right? Wicked people will all be defeated. Wise and God-fearing people will always be victorious. Uh, sounds pretty good. So according to this wisdom psalm, wisdom is good behavior. It is knowing the right thing to do. It is doing the right thing in all situations. And good, ethical, wise people will be rewarded, and evil people will be punished. One of the things about the wisdom school, since wisdom resides in the human mind, not in the divine mind, it's not concentrated in the divine mind like revelation. Different people think differently. So when you go through the wisdom literature, as opposed to the rest of the rest of the Tanakh, whenever talking about revelation, we can expect consistency. Since all prophecy comes from God, in the prophetic text, you can expect absolute consistency. Now, of course, prophecy is funneled through different people, so they'll take different takes on it. Okay, but you're not going to have one prophet who says keep Shabbos, another prophet who says don't bother keeping Shabbos. That doesn't happen with prophecy. But with wisdom, it's a little different. Since humans process differently, different wisdom thinkers think differently. And again, I think this is one of the great appeals of wisdom among biblical literature, is it allows a diversity of opinion, a pluralism of sorts of ideas, certain themes that keep repeating, but it's something that is very human, I think, that can speak to us in a very different way today than the prophetic text can. And we're going to see today in the book of Job a very different take on how reward and punishment work. I want to turn to the last. I want to review from last time. At the end of my lecture last week, I pointed out to you that wisdom is our own way of navigating through the world, and Joseph navigates through the world completely on his own through the book of Genesis. But at the end of Bereshit, literally at the end, the very last chapter of the book of Bereshit, Joseph says to his brothers, and we did this last time, V'yomer aleihem Yosef, al tira'u ki hatachat Elohim ani. That was the title of my lecture last time. Joseph said to his brothers, have no fear, am I a substitute for God? Besides, although you intended me harm, God intended it for good so as to bring about the present result, the survival of many people. Joseph acknowledges here that there are two parallel worlds going on. There's God's world up there, and there's the human world down here. I was operating through wisdom. I was finding my own way through the world, but God had a larger plan for the world, and I just figured out, right, how I fit into that larger plan. All of that suffering that I had, that I was kidnapped, that I was thrown in a pit, that I was separated from my family, fathers, all that pain, all that suffering. Joseph said, I realized in the end I was part of a larger plan that I didn't know. I want to point out that the Joseph story is different from our story today as humans, only in that Joseph figured out that there is this larger plan. I get it, right? God needed to save all of Egypt. God needed to get us down to Egypt. There was a larger thing going on with the redemption of the Jewish people and the saving of the world. We go through our daily suffering down here on earth without that knowledge of that larger plan. But we are like Joseph in that we are trying to navigate our way with wisdom. the beauty of the conclusion of the book of Genesis and of Joseph's statement is when you realize, oh my goodness, I'm part of a larger plan, it does put your own suffering and it does put your own pain in a larger context. We, however, simply don't have that access. The beauty of this pasuk in Genesis is that Joseph does figure out that larger plan. Which brings us to today's topic, which is the book of Job, the book of Eov. I'm guessing that the participants here are familiar with the book of Eov. I'm hoping, of course, to give you some new chidushim, some new insights. I complained last time that I was saying things that aren't found in Chazal and traditional sources. I want to adjust my personal confession. My job as a teacher is to give you things that you wouldn't have found in other places. That's why I'm here. So if things that I say are things that, well, I didn't hear about that before, I feel gratified because that's what I'm really trying to do here, to give you some new insights, and feel free to push back at the end when we talk about questions if you disagree. Uh, the book of Job, like the last verses of Genesis, acknowledge this idea of the two worlds, the human world and the divine world. Joseph, as I said, speaks about how I was living my life here on earth and I saw that there was a divine larger plan that was guiding all of history. The book of Job begins exactly the same way as the Joseph story. The only difference is Job, like us, doesn't know what's going on in the divine realm. So I make sure that's clear. In the Joseph story, Joseph was unaware most of his life, right? That there was a larger thing going on up in heaven that explained his suffering down on earth. Job, as we begin the book, is operating on the earthly plan. We'll go up to the divine realm, but pay attention as we read through the beginning of the book of Job that the two realms are separate. We get, as the reader, the two perspectives, what's going on earth and what's going on in heaven. But unlike the Joseph story at the end, Job down on earth does not know what is going on up above. Here is how the book of Job begins. Ish haya be'eretz Utz, Eov shmo, v'ya'ish ahu tam v'yashar v'yarei Elohim b'sar me'ra. There was a man in the land of Utz, Uz in English, we'll get to that in 1 second, named Job. That man was blameless and upright. He feared the Lord and shunned evil. Notice these key terms that identify wisdom literature. You see now this pattern. You'll be able to spot it now when you read through the Tanakh, right? The idea of being blameless and upright, right? Conducting yourself morally, the idea of fearing God, shunning evil. Those are hallmarks of the wisdom literature. We see it here in the book of Job. And I want to just point out where he lands, where he lives. He lives in the land of Uz, in the land of Uz. We do not know where the land of Uz is. Rashi thinks it's somewhere in Edom, but it is significant that it is a land that is almost mythical, and we'll see that in a moment. It could be anywhere. It is significant that this is not a place that we can easily identify. In fact, there's a wonderful theory, might not be true, but there's a wonderful theory that this is where the author of The Wizard of Oz got the term Oz from Uz, right? The idea of this mythical land somewhere. And even if L. Frank Baum did not get it that way, certainly the Hebrew translators of The Wizard of Oz made the connection. And if you take a look at the Hebrew translation of The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy does not go to Oz; she goes to Utz, the land of Job. This idea that it is some mythical land somewhere. And as we read through the chapter, there is something about the book of Job that seems a little otherworldly, even though it's clearly planted here on earth, that seems to be just a little too perfect. 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. By the way, 7 and 3, this is a topic of a different lecture, are biblical numbers of perfection. And of course, they add up to 10, which is also a biblical number of perfection, as in the Ten Commandments. He has the perfect number of sons, the perfect number of daughters. His possessions were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels. There you see the repetition of the 7 and 3. 7 and 3 are always indications of things being perfect. That's obviously why Shabbat and holidays always run on sevens and threes, and their multiples. 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 she-asses, and a very large household. That man was wealthier than anyone in the East. Again, a hallmark of wisdom literature, right? The idea that this is taking place in the East. This is taking place in the land of wisdom. Job is situating himself right in the middle of the hub of wisdom. It was the custom of his sons to hold feasts, each on his set day. In his own home, they would invite 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When the round of feast days was over, Job would send word to them to sanctify themselves and to rise early in the morning. He would make burnt offerings, one for each of them. For Job thought, perhaps my children have sinned and blasphemed God in their thoughts. And this is what Job used to do. So his sons and daughters would get together to party and to feast. Why? We'll see this in 2 weeks in the lecture. Enjoying the rewards that God gives to wise people is part of the wisdom literature. The idea that God rewards the upright means you should accept the reward. You are being rewarded for being wise. People should see that wise people are rewarded. And you see that all of these people are summarily rewarded, and so they're able to eat and drink. Now, of course, humans, when they eat and drink, might go overboard. So Job, as an insurance policy, right, make sure all of them purify themselves, because maybe they got drunk and said something that they shouldn't have said. The book is setting us up. This guy is unbelievable, right? He takes out an insurance policy for the souls of his children, just in case they might have done anything bad. And there's no indication that they've done anything wrong. It's just setting up the story as Job and his children, just the perfect ideal family, wealthy. And of course, we're meant to understand that all of this wealth is, as we were told in the book of Psalms, in the psalm that we read, all of this wealth comes from the fact that they were wise and ethical, etc. Now, I promised you that we would see a scene change. And now, in verse 6, the scene changes to heaven. So again, earth to heaven, then we're going to come back down to earth again. We get, as the reader, a view into what's going on upstairs, what's going on with God. One day, the divine beings presented themselves before the Lord. Divine beings are the angels who keep God company up in heaven. And the adversary, Hasatan, came along with them. There is a particular angel called Hasatan. Obviously, Christians truly personify him as Satan, not a topic for today. An angel whose job it is to be an adversary to humans. The Lord said to the adversary, to Hasatan, "Where have you been?" The adversary answered the Lord, "I've been roaming all over the earth." The Lord said to the adversary, "Have you noticed my servant Job? There is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil. So far, so good. Everything that's going on in heaven is paralleling what goes on earth. On earth, Job is righteous, he is good, he does all the right things. Up in heaven, God is saying, look at Job. He is righteous and good and upright and does all the right things. The ideal wise man, fearing of the Lord. So far, heaven and earth are operating in tandem, and God's quite proud of that. The adversary answered the Lord, "Does Job not have good reason to fear the Lord? Why, it is you who have fenced him round, and his household and all that he has. You have blessed his efforts so that his possessions spread out in the land." The adversary says, there's another side to rewarding people for their goodness. Maybe they're only being good because they're being rewarded. Maybe there's like a problem in this plan here. The Lord replied to the adversary, "See all that he has in your power." Uh, oh, sorry. But the adversary continues, "But lay your hand upon all that he has, and he will surely blaspheme you to your face." Hasatan, the adversary says, Job is not being good for because he's wise, because he's upright, because he's just, because he is a disinterested God-fearer. He's doing all this because of the reward. It's transactional. Lay your hand upon all that he has, and he'll surely blaspheme you to your face. Take away all of that, and he will no longer be a good, wise, and upright person. The Lord replied to the adversary, "See, all that he has is in your power, only do not lay a hand on him." The adversary departed from the presence of the Lord. So God and the adversary and the Satan have a bet, right? God bets that Job is a good, wise, upright person, unself-interested. He's doing this all for the right reasons. The adversary says this is all self-interested. God says, see what happens if you mess with this guy and put him through pain. See what happens, and that's where we leave heaven. So now we are back down to earth. I'm going to point out yet again, the people on earth have no idea what's going on in heaven, just like us. Okay, Job has no idea of this bet that happened between God and the Satan. No clue what's going on up there. All Job is going to see is what happens to him, and it is devastating. It's worth reading through, even though we do it quickly because it's written beautifully here. One day, as his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the house of their eldest brother, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the she-asses were grazing alongside them, when Sabaeans attacked them and carried them off and put the boys to the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you." This one was still speaking when another came and said, "God's fire fell from heaven, took hold of the sheep and the boys and burned them up. I alone have escaped to tell you." This one was still speaking when another came and said, "The Chaldean formation of 3 columns made a raid on the camels and carried them off and put the boys to the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you." This one was still speaking when another came and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the house of their elder brother, when suddenly a mighty wind came from the wilderness. It struck the 4 corners of the house so that it collapsed upon the young people, and they died. I alone have escaped to tell you." One by one, you see when the adversary, when Satan works, he works quickly, he is efficient. Everything that Job has, his children, his wealth, his home, his family, everything is completely wiped out. He loses everything in this bet in heaven that he has no knowledge about. Job is made to suffer complete and utter devastation for reasons that he has no knowledge about. Then Job arose, tore his robe, cut off his hair, and threw himself on the ground and worshipped. He said, "Naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach." The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. One of the very, very few psukim of Job that is ever quoted liturgically. The book of Job is almost never quoted in the liturgy. This is, of course, said at funerals, and rightfully so. This is said when Job looks at the funeral of everything that he loved and everything that he had. For all that, Job did not sin, nor did he cast reproach on God. So the Satan loses the bet. Job does not blaspheme God. And we will go through the rest of the book of Job, tens of chapters, when Job's friends, his wife will encourage him to blaspheme God, and a lot of processing is going to go with all of that happened to him. The important thing for us is that Job loses everything despite all of his wisdom, despite all of his goodness, all of this for reasons that he has no idea about. The book of Job is about a theme that is taken up throughout the wisdom literature: why bad things happen to good people. Job, interesting throughout the book, will never claim that he is perfect. The book tries to portray him as truly an ideal person, to like idealize him, but Job himself never calls himself a perfect person. He describes himself as a good person, like we would probably describe ourselves, imperfect human beings, but basically good and decent people. That a terrible thing has happened to the most terrible thing that happened to us. And the wisdom literature throughout all of the books and all of the chapters explores this theme of why bad things happen to good people. The psalm that we read earlier, Psalm 112, says that that's not the case. Psalm 112 says that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. And certainly there are parts of the wisdom literature that say, no, 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 the world really works that way. Bad things happen to bad people, good things happen to good people. But the book of Job explores what is something that we ourselves experience, which is that bad things happen to good people all the time. Rabbi Kalman couldn't be with us today. There's, of course, was a famous book that explored the book of Job and other human tragedy called "Why Bad Things Happen to Good People." It's written by a conservative rabbi by the name of Harold Kushner. And I remember Rabbi Kalman and I, as well as some of the people who are on this Zoom, grew up in Toronto. When I was growing up in Toronto, you could not buy the book "Why Bad Things Happen to Good People" in the only Jewish bookstore for one point at the Negev.
But the title
Negev
is
Jewish
When
Bookstore.
Bad Things
The store would
Happen.
not sell the book because they found it to be blasphemous to question the goodness of God. It was the only book that they refused to sell on principle. But the book of Job is not afraid to question this and to explore this. And I want to talk to you about what the book of Job has to say about this. But first, I want to turn to Chazal, to the rabbis, in Masechet Bava Batra in the Talmud, to show you what the rabbis hypothesized about the book. Very briefly, the rabbis you see here hypothesized that Moses actually wrote the book of Job. Moshe katav sifro ve'iyov. Moses wrote his own book, that's the Torah, and the book of Job. The rabbis had an opinion that Moses was actually the author of the book of Job. That Moses actually wrote this story. This story goes all the way back to the time of Moses, because the issue of suffering of good people was something that Moses himself was dealing with. Looking at the Jewish people suffering in Egypt, right? Moses was concerned about this idea. Why are all of these people suffering? Why are the Jewish people suffering? And therefore wrote this book. Rabbi Levi ben Lachma, Iobime Moshe Haya, Rabbi Levi, son of Lachma, said that means that Job lived in the time of Moses. Moses was actually talking about the real guy, Job, who lived in the time of Moses. You'll see here, though, very significantly, there is a huge amount of discrepancy among the rabbis as to when Job lived. First, we have the idea that he lived in the time of Moses. Then Rava says that Job lived at the time of the spies. That was at the end of the 40 years. At the end of the second year after we left Egypt. That Job lived sometime during a little bit a bit later in Moses's life. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said Job never existed. Eov lo haya velo nivra, ela mashal haya. Rabbi Shmuel ben Bar Nachmani, very radical statement, says that this whole book is just an allegory. The reason why it looks so perfect is because the book itself never really happened. There was never really a person named Job. There was really never a land of Uz, whatever. The whole thing is just a morality tale. Don't take it at face value. It never really happened. Then we have rabbis who said, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar said that Job was among those who came back from the exile at the time of the Second Temple. Rabbi Elazar said Job lived in the days of the Shoftim, in the times of the judges, in the era after Moses and Joshua. Then you have Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha, who says that Eov lived in the days of Achashverosh. And if you go through the Gemara, you'll see there are many other opinions as well. We don't have to occupy ourselves with this debate. The importance of this is, I believe, the Gemara and the rabbis here are trying to tell us Eov exists in all times and in all places. His story is a universal story. The issue of suffering, the idea of why bad things happen to good people is something that all humans deal with, which is why Job cannot be placed. It's not a specifically Jewish story. In fact, it's clear from the Gemara that many of these opinions assume that Job wasn't even Jewish. Uh, he doesn't have to be Jewish. This is something that humans deal with. As I said, wisdom is a universal concept. It's nothing specifically tied to the people. The only thing that you have to believe is you have to believe in a single God. That you have to be a monotheist. You have to believe that only one God exists. If you're a polytheist and you believe that all sorts of gods exist, so then people can suffer because gods fight with each other, and sometimes gods win, and sometimes gods lose. But if you believe in one singular power in the universe, then you really have to wonder why bad things happen to good people. Uh, the way to look at the issue of the book of Job is what's called the theodicy triangle. You'll see this in many, many different forms if you read books on theodicy. Theodicy is, which means the justification of God, is a fancy way of asking why bad things happen to good people. And it works like this. If you imagine three postulates going from the bottom left-hand corner, Job is good. We're told that from the beginning of the book. Job is a good person, good, upright, wise person. God is omnipotent. As I said, there's one God, there's one universal force that controls the entire universe. And there's a doctrine of retribution, namely, as we saw in the Wisdom Psalms, bad things happen to bad people and good things happen to good people. People are rewarded for their goodness and people are punished for their wickedness. If you take a look at this triangle, all three cannot be true. Only two of the three can be true. So, for instance, Job's friends throughout the book say to Job, look, God is all powerful. We all agree on that. There is divine retribution. Bad things happen to bad people. Good things happen to good people. We know that must be true. The world operates on justice. Therefore, Job's friends say to him, the third, Job the good, cannot be true. Job, you must have done something wrong. That's the only thing that's possible. All three things can't be true. If Job is good and God is all powerful, Job should be rewarded. Job should not suffer. And therefore, the friends say, Job, you're the issue. Job the good cannot be true. Job says, not possible. I promise you, I'm a good guy. I've never done anything to justify this. I'm good. I certainly know that there is divine retribution, that good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. We all know that that's how the world must work. And therefore, Job says there must be some issue with God. Must be some issue with God, because it can't be possible that I'm good, and that good is rewarded and evil is punished. Not possible. So it must be some problem with God. The book of Job says that the issue is with the doctrine of retribution. The book of Job says the issue is that we here on earth, in our earthly realm, operate in a system that says you do good things, you reward people for good things, you do bad things, we punish people for bad things. That's how the world works. That's how the human world works. And that's what human wisdom is all about. However, there is a world above. There is a world of God that operates based on completely different rules. And this is the important thing, we do not have access to that world of wisdom. So I'm going to add this week a second element to wisdom that I did not talk about last week. Last week, I talked about wisdom as a general concept that all comes from God. What we saw at the very end of last week, and that I want to focus on this week as we're wrapping up, is this idea that there is the realm of human knowledge and human wisdom that we have access to, that we can think about, that is how we operate, and that is how wise people should operate. However, there is a separate realm of the divine that operates differently, that we do not have access to. That is the issue. The doctrine of retribution is not something that operates in the divine realm. As Joseph saw, God had a whole different plan than I had here down on earth. And we see this in the 38th chapter of the book of Job. In the 38th chapter of the book of Job, God comes to Job to explain to him the answer to the problem. Job has been asking, why do all these things happen to me? Why do bad things happen to me, a good person? And God says this. Vayan Hashem et Eov min hasera. The Lord replied to Job out of the storm. And by the way, not a coincidence, God appears out of a storm. Storms are always the locus of revelation. That's why Har Sinai is described as being in a storm before the Torah is given. Whenever you see a storm in Tanakh, a good chance that God is going to appear as a sign of revelation. So God breaks out and talks to Job. And God says, Misa machshich etza. Who is this that darkens counsel, speaking without knowledge? You guys don't know what you're talking about. Eifo haita b'yasdi aretz. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Speak if you have understanding. Remember, we saw in the beginning that God founded the earth on some primordial wisdom, and God says to Job, "Where were you? Like you know this like divine wisdom." Have you ever commanded the day to break, assigned the dawn its place, so that it seizes the corners of the earth and shakes the wicked out of it, so the light is withheld from the wicked? God says to Job, you're kind of like me, right? You wake up in the morning, you command the morning, okay? You put dawn in place, you shake out the earth as if it were the sheets on your bed that you're making in the morning, right? And you see every morning I wake up, I shake out my sheets, I shake all the evil off my sheets, like one would shake off the bed bugs, and you see that every day I withhold the sun, I withhold light from the wicked people, right? Light's withheld from the wicked, right? You see every morning, right? I make sure the sun only shines on good people, and there's darkness on bad people, right? Of course not. We wake up in the morning and we see every day the wicked are on the sheets. The wicked are there all the time, and the same sun shines on the wicked and on the good alike. God says, when you look out at the earth, do you have any indication that there is a doctrine of retribution? Is there anything in the world that would lead you to believe that I reward the righteous and punish the wicked? Like it happens sometimes, but like, do you see that rule written anywhere in nature? There is nothing on earth to indicate that that is true. I have a different system up here, and I'm going to prove it to you. Who cut a channel for the torrents and the path for the thunderstorms? To rain down on uninhabited land, that was the title of my lecture, on the wilderness where no man is, to saturate the desolate wasteland and make the crops of grass sprout forth. God says, I've told you elsewhere in the Bible, in fact, we say it twice a day, right? Twice a day we say in the Shema, right, that if we obey God's commandments, right, uh, God will grant rain for the land. And if we don't obey God's commandments, the God will withhold rain. Right? We say this twice a day in the Shema. This is Deuteronomy 11, that God rewards us for good deeds by bringing forth rain. And when we do bad things, God withholds the rain. God says to Job, is that the world that you live in? In the world that you live in, it rains in the desert, which does no good. Rain in the desert does absolutely no good. It is a complete waste of water when there are people suffering and starving from famine because there are all sorts of lands that don't receive rain. Is there anything about the world that you live in that makes you believe that there is some doctrine of retribution that goes on? No, that does not exist in the upper realm. And therefore, the book of Job concludes that human knowledge operates in the human realm. What humans should do is spend our time thinking about our world and how to behave in our world and how to operate by our principles, which we saw Joseph operating in last week. But in terms of a larger realm, the realm of divine wisdom, that is a realm of wisdom that we do not operate in and we do not have access to. And with that, I will conclude and open for question. In the 28th chapter of the book of Job, which is known as the wisdom chapter, it is the chapter of the book of Job that is most focused on wisdom. Look at how Job 28 explains this. Job 28. There is a mine for silver, and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken out of the earth, and copper smelted from rock. Its rocks are a source of sapphire. It contains gold dust too. No birds of prey know the path to it. The proud beasts have not reached it. Man has set his hand against the flinty rock, overturns mountains by roots, carves out channels through the rock. He dams up sources of the stream so that the hidden things may be brought to light. The book of Job says humans are great with technology. We can mine silver. We can refine gold. We can do things that no other creature can do. We have wisdom. We know how to manipulate the physical world, right? By using wisdom and how to operate. We can create beautiful and great things. That's what Joseph does, right? Joseph creates this economic system in order to save all of Egypt. He uses human wisdom and human resources to deal with the human world and to bring goodness to the human world. Humans can do that. We have wisdom and we can apply it to technology. We can dam up waters. That we can do, right? We can create lakes in places that it didn't exist. Verse 12. But where can wisdom be found? Where is the source of understanding? It cannot be bartered for gold. Silver cannot be paid out. A pouch of wisdom is better than rubies. Whence does wisdom come? Where is the source of understanding? Verse 21, V'nelma meinei chol chai. It is hidden from the eyes of all living. God understands the way to it. He knows its source. when he fixed the weights of the wind, set the measures of the water. When he saw it, engaged it. He measured it and probed it. In the beginning of the world, God understood the larger divine wisdom. That is nothing that we have access to. The idea of wisdom is that wisdom is a human activity. In terms of the divine realm, we can only follow this guidance. Vayomer la'adam, chen yirat Hashem hi chochma. He says to man, see, the fear of the Lord is wisdom. To shun evil is understanding. When it comes to the divine realm, we can live as God-fearers, but divine wisdom, that is a type of wisdom that we do not have access to. And then for the next two lectures, we will therefore focus on the type of wisdom that we do have access to, namely human wisdom. I thank you for joining us, and I will turn to the chat to see if there are any questions that I can answer. Oh, I'm sorry. Someone asked if I can make the source sheet bigger. I do publish the source sheet earlier if you want it, and I will try for next time to do that. Fear the Lord or revere the Lord. Uh, 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 the Hebrew has a larger what you call semantic range than the English. Fear, reverence. The word doesn't exactly translate into English. I think it contains aspect of both and not necessarily exactly what we say in English. That God is easily persuaded to challenge an innocent Job is disturbing. Sure, it's disturbing, which gives a lot of credence to this idea that the whole thing, as we saw in the Gemara, maybe didn't happen. That this is just a morality tale. That this is just an allegory, and we're not meant to take this as something that literally happened. Uh, if doctrine of retribution is not inherent divine wisdom, then why does man insist on its existence in the supposedly divine realm inspired? Literally, how do you say? Oh, very, very good question. So you will see throughout the wisdom literature, yes, there are wisdom writers who try to say, there must be some connection between the two. Um, uh, uh, um, it doesn't make sense that it's so obvious to us that the good should be rewarded and the evil punished. Is it possible that like doesn't exist in the divine realm? Please God, when we get to the next two lectures and we take a look at especially the last one in Kohelet, you'll see there are some quite sophisticated answers that we have in the book of Kohelet that tries to reconcile the two. The reason why I wanted to present Job today is really to show you that within the wisdom school, we can have such diverse thought. We can have, on the one hand, like I showed you in the Psalm, the idea that it really should all be true here on earth, and the opposite with the Jobian idea that what leads us to believe that any of this should is true in any grand sense. You'll see, especially in the last lecture when we get to Kohelet, that there are ways of reconciling it that we find in the wisdom literature. Um, uh, but we know that the real world there is no justice. Evil often goes unpunished. Precisely so. Precisely so. That's exactly what the book of Job says. We, as wise people, can put together systems of justice. We can create courts. We can feed the hungry. We can be generous to the poor. We can create reward and punishment and justice here on earth within human wisdom, but in terms of the divine realm, we do not have any access to the type of wisdom that God operates on. And again, if you think back to last week's lecture, the Joseph story, If Joseph had no idea about God's larger plan, what would he have thought about his own life, right? Like how random, right? I went through all of this suffering, then like I went through all this great stuff. Like, what on earth is going on? Had Joseph not recognized this at the end, he would have been a victim of the same type of confusion that we have in our own lives. Why do things go well for us sometimes, and why do things go badly? Thank you for the nice compliment. Morality book. What positive lesson in this? The positive lesson, I would say, is that here on earth, it is our responsibility to create a moral and just world based on our human wisdom. That is the morality lesson. That it is my job to make sure that when I see inequity, I correct it. It is my job when I see there is suffering to prevent that type of suffering. It is my job to create a world that most conforms to what wisdom would tell me is a good and just way of acting in terms of my own actions. That is the positive lesson of the book, if I had to suggest it. Okay, thank you for joining me, and hopefully we'll see you for the next lecture when we will explore the wisdom of King Solomon, who I showed you at the very beginning was the wisest of the wise. Thank you too. Till next week. Shalom,
Thank
shalom.
you, Rabbi.